Welcome to another episode of The Dissection. In this episode, I want to discuss which political parties, were the best performing and worst performing parties in 2024. I think we can still have that conversation. So I'm going to start off with the worst performances of 2024. I'm going to give my top 5 political parties, but I thought I should give the wooden mic, right, to these two political parties based on the information that I'm about to divulge now. So, worst performance of 2024, coming in at number 1, Change Starts Now. Why does Change Start Now get the worst performance of 2024? This political party launched with coverage from big media publications. They got 2 Sunday Times front pages. 2. Other political parties the whole year never got any from their time of launch up until the time of their demise. They got 2. Other political parties never even got a single one. The party launched in December and then withdrew from the election race in March, right? So grand opening, grand closing. For me, they deserve this because they were most hyped. They got a significant amount of funding and could not even make it to the finish line, to the starting line even. Yeah, starting line, right? Because the election is actually the starting line. So I give Roger Jardin's led party, Change Starts Now, the biggest L of 2024. The lessons from this particular political party, its launch, its demise, everything, is that the media does not have the power to create brands anymore in the way that it used to. The Sunday Times big splash at the end of the day did not mean much. Getting people who were prominent in Daily Maverick and other publications to become members of the party did not mean much, because if you remember, they got Mark Haywood, who was doing a lot of journalism there at Daily Maverick after his career as an activist, to join them. It didn't mean much. He didn't have relevance for the people, the streets, the media houses were not able to push a name to the public and get that name to be accepted. The other lesson is that boardrooms, billionaires can no longer create political winners in the way that they used to, right? There was a lot of money given to this political party. Michel Leroux put 15 million, another undisclosed individual put 15 million, someone else put 5 million, but at the end, it did not mean much. Just because you're a billionaire, just because you're rich, just because you own a bank or whatever the case may be, doesn't mean that you can create political winners. It does not necessarily mean that. You can give money to people who are already playing the game and accelerate their growth, but to create a winner from nothing is no longer possible. And we learned that. And I think the last lesson from Change Starts Now was that you have to have credibility in a particular space for the audience to take you seriously. Roger Jardin was simply somebody that people did not know, who had not been doing any political activism, any political work. He had no traction on the ground. So for him to emerge all of a sudden talking about Change Starts Now, yes, but who are you? Who are you is always the first question in politics. Who are you, chief? Mbani wena? If people don't know you like that, they're not going to give you support like that. Right now, I can't come and drop him Bakanga album and call it Gucci Paris, or maybe I'll call it Armani London or something like that. I can't tell people what is Zoya in London right now. As who? I can't do that, you know? People can do that if they've got credibility, but you can't. If I start right now reviewing Maskandi, you're gonna ask, from what angle is he reviewing Maskandi? It just cannot happen. So, biggest loser, I think, goes to Change That Starts Now. Wooden mic, political wooden mic. The other biggest loser, number 2, and I've only done 2 because I want to do the top 5. This has to go, the runner-up, right, has to go to ActionSA. I even almost said ActionDA, because the decision to join the moonshot arrangement really cost Herman Mashaba and his party. They really began to look like DA at some point. They were able to get lots of funding, but ultimately the moonshot arrangement was a trick by the DA to consolidate rivals, to manage them, and to distract them with all of this moonshot meetings, arrangements, while the DA remained 1 foot out the door, considering an ANC coalition to begin with, right? So Herman Mashaba spent a lot of time doing moonshot things instead of focusing on his party, campaigning hard for his party. ActionSA got caught up discussing imaginary scenarios which were supposed to be reserved for a post-election environment, while they should have been running a strong race, differentiating themselves and making it clear why they should be chosen over other political parties which were giving an offering. Leaving the DA in 2019, then working with them in 2024, it was a contradiction, and it was a contradiction that did two things for ActionSA. Number one, they lost supporters who did not support the Democratic Alliance, right? Because already you're in a coalition with these guys. I don't like these guys. Why would I give you any of my support? So those people looked for other political homes. Then anybody who was on the fence about them or the DA then went to the DA. Because why would I vote for a light version of the DA when I can just vote for the DA itself? They needed to differentiate themselves and play a game where they would have also been contradictory to the DA. They didn't do that. So the party went backwards. And because they went backwards, they also deserve that wooden mic in the way that I'm going to describe it. ActionSA got 500,000 votes in the local government elections. They only contested in Gauteng. Their projections was that they were going to move from 500,000 to something between 2.5 million to 5 million votes, right? And they were extrapolating and say, if we did so well in one province, multiply that by 9, we're going to be doing very well nationally. We're going to become a national player. They got a significant amount of funding, but ultimately they dropped from 500,000 to 192,000 votes. And for that, I think they are the runner-up of the worst performers, right? Now, ActionSA is not necessarily in a bad place because they have a good opportunity in their mayorship of Tshwane. If they can continue notching wins there, they may be able to recover some of the votes that they lost in 2024. I mean, they fixed the water problem in Hammanskraal as is being reported. You know, I need to go to Hammanskraal myself and see what the situation on the ground is and what people are saying. They are targeting the dumping issue right now. Illegal dumping of waste contributes to rodent infestations, just smells, it's unsightly, and it's what makes people buy agrotoxins like organophosphate, which have been implicated in pediatric deaths, which we've seen being reported. So if they're able to do well in Tshwane, govern well, and manage the coalitions, and show that they have a vision for local government and also for national government, they may be able to bounce back. Whether there'll be another, performance from Change Starts Now, no, I don't think so. I think you don't take 35 million rands from people, fail to get to the starting line, and have a political comeback. I think it's over for them. Now, top 5. Let's talk about the top 5 political parties, right? Coming in at number 1, Mkhonto weSizwe Party. Mkhonto weSizwe has to get number 1 because they went from 0 to 2.3 million votes in 6 months. That is an impressive outcome. And we have to be objective, whether you like them or not, whether you support them or not, whether you think they're anti-constitutional or not. When we're measuring performance on the pitch, we look at the scores. We look at how many goals have gone in. So, if you think about what MK did, it's notable that they were able to come in this strong. They had a stronger opening than COPE, which came in at 1.3 million votes and 7%, and EFF, which came in at 1.1 million votes and 6% of the vote. MK came in much stronger and had a blowout performance in KwaZulu-Natal. To be honest, I'm one of the people who underestimated the MK party. I did not think that they were going to be the force that they turned out to be. I actually thought they would come in between 6 and 8%. I was obviously wrong. Very strong performance. The ground game was very strong. In a media environment which was not so supportive of them, they were able to, one, prove that Jacob Zuma still has the tactical prowess on the ground, that he's still the most popular politician outside of places like Sandton, Umhlanga, and Hout Bay, right? Because sometimes Sandton, Sea Point, Hout Bay, they have their own worldview. City Ball in Cape Town, you have your own worldview, but that is not the national worldview. It's still very clear that Jacob Zuma is one of the most popular, if not the most popular politician. I think he's more popular than Cyril Ramaphosa. I think he's more popular than Julius Malema. I think he's more popular than anybody, Gayton McKenzie, who is currently active in politics. And that remains true. Sometimes they were disorganized. They had, let's call it anticlimactic first year celebration at the end of the year. But the number one position still, I think, goes to them in terms of they have the momentum, they have the mojo, and they are influencing the political posturing, rhetoric, and positioning of all of the other parties. So whether you like them or not, whether I like them or not, is irrelevant. We have to be objective. Facts don't care about our feelings. We have to be scientific, we have to be empirical, and we have to look at things the way that they are. MK also showed that they are able to cause political influence and consequences in other political parties, because we saw that they were a troublemaker for the EFF because of the departures of some EFF leaders and high-profile leaders within the EFF who then joined MK and then started becoming MK, activists, spokespeople, vocal for MK in the last 2 months. Floyd Shivambu, Advocate Dalimpofu, Advocate Busiwe Mkhwebane, Zwanele Manyi, all of these people who were within the fold of the EFF. Some of them, it was evident that they are going to go and join MK. It wasn't so much of a surprise, but still, MK was a factor. The fact that you have 2.3 million votes, 14%, all within a short space of time, and are still influencing the positioning, the posturing, the rhetoric of all of the other parties nearest to you, that shows, I think, a strong performance from the MK. Whether or not they can sustain that to 2026 is what we will see in the coming months. But if we're looking at 2024, we have to give MK the win. Number 2, this is going to surprise you. It's going to surprise you because some people think I'm too critical of this organization. Number 2 goes to the Democratic Alliance. I give second best performance to the Democratic Alliance because they were able to effectively get themselves into government, prevent their 2 biggest opponents from getting close to the levers of power. Their 2 biggest opponents in their own rhetoric are MK and EFF, right? They got 5 cabinet positions for their leaders. So DA came in with 3.5 million votes, 21.8% of the total vote. This performance is something I'm going to discuss a little bit later, but it was a strong enough performance to be able to get them all of the things that they wanted, right? The DA also raised a lot of money, and that is something that you have to give them credit for. They were able to go to donors and attract money from donors. They raised 180 million in 2024 in this election cycle from donors. Some of that was reported in Q4, which ended in April, and some of that was reported in the first quarter. But in total, in this election cycle, they were able to raise 180 million. That's not chump change. That's what allowed them to have a presence on radio in the way that they did, to be able to put up a lot of campaign materials in the way that they did. Volunteers and all of this stuff needs money to be able to run your operation. The DA, from a funding perspective, had the best turnout in terms of funding, best fundraising operation. I think that if they didn't raise this money, they would have had a worse off performance. But they did raise the money. You can't argue the counterfactual in a case where it doesn't exist. This instance is one where they got the votes, they got the money, and they were able to execute the plan which they've had from 2019. Remember, Helen Zille had a voice note which leaked, where she had spoken about how the DA just needs to stay close to 20%, and they will be able to form a coalition with a declining ANC and use that 20% for maximum leverage. They were able to do that. So they have to come in at number 2 in terms of strongest performers, right? But it's worth pointing out that the DA has a growth problem in terms of absolute votes, real voters, because politics is a numbers game. So what's happening with the DA in terms of voters, the people, real people? They're losing people. The DA was on 4.1 million voters in 2014, right? They had a smaller vote share because the turnout was higher, about 16.6%, but they had 4 million voters who went to the ballot and voted for them. They woke up in the morning, they took a bath, went and voted DA. Helen Zille was the lead candidate in 2014. Then now they are on 3.5 million voters. From 4.1 million to 3.5 million. That's a decline in 10 years, a loss of 600,000 voters, right? So even though they were able to regain some of the percentage that they lost in 2019, this is because of a smaller voter turnout, a lower voter turnout. A percentage can go up for two reasons. One, you have a bigger share of a smaller cake, or you have a bigger share of a bigger cake, right? Or a bigger share of the same cake, right? But in this instance, it was the former. The DA had a bigger percentage of a smaller cake. So if you look at the percentage, you say 21.8, oh, that's up from your previous performance. But if you look at voters, the real people, you can see that there are less people in Club DA. And if that continues over time, they will lose second largest party status, and they will lose that 21, 22% type of turnout, because you can't continue to hope that you will be able to be a big political player whilst you're losing numbers. Losing numbers in real terms, hemorrhaging numbers, is something that any political party has to worry about. So 600,000 in a decade, that's significant, right? But they're still number 2 in my books for 2024 because of the way that they played the game, their positionality. Number 3 has to go to Patriotic Alliance and Gayton McKenzie. Why do I say this? Gayton McKenzie and his party managed to turn a chaotic manifesto launch in Gauteng around. If you remember, they went to FNB Stadium and it was a movie. They were blaming everybody because the stadium was empty. Gayton was saying, Abaha, to an empty stadium. And at that point, it looked like, yeah, no, these guys are in trouble. They are, they've bitten more than they can chew, and they're not going to be a factor going forward. But they were pragmatic, honest with themselves. Gayton changed the strategy, went and campaigned more effectively in the Northern Cape, in the Western Cape, partly because these provinces have large colored communities, but not exclusively because of that. But that's part of it, right? And in those 2 provinces, his party got over 5% of the vote share and was in the top 4. They were number 3 actually in the Western Cape. So when you looked at their final rally, the Western Cape Stadium was full. You could see that now Gayton has momentum. Gayton has turned things around, right? And they were able to move from 6,600 votes in 2019 to over 300,000 votes in one election cycle. That's an impressive growth rate. It's a growth rate of 4,455. 4,445%. 4,445% growth. What? That's a big number. Whether you like his politics or not, this is not about evaluating political ideology or rhetoric. It's about saying who had strong performances. Then for him to be able to get a high profile, high visibility portfolio such as sports, it's something that's going to benefit his party going forward, because sports allows you to go to all of the victories and claim them and be visible, but also to not necessarily be easily held accountable on underperformance, because a lot of the issues that need to be fixed in sports, arts and culture are long-sitting issues, right? I actually think that there's a lot that can be done, and we did an episode on that, speaking about what the minister can do. You can look for that on the main channel page. You'll find that. But sports allows you a lot of visibility in high-profile moments, and then all your losses are not necessarily seen by the public. So it's a space where if you are a PR, public relations minister, there have been some leaders who've used PR quite effectively, to look very busy, very effective, but not necessarily changing the fundamentals of their MEC positions or whatever the case may be. So Gayton McKenzie, he gets 3rd position in terms of performance. Number 4 goes to the economic freedom fighters. The reason why they get number 4 is because they lost voters. I'm only doing 5, by the way. So we're getting towards the end. They lost voters. In 2019, the EFF was at 1.8 million with 10.8% of the vote share. 2024, they were on 1.53 million and 9.5% of the vote. That's a depreciation. That's a decline. They lost a lot of votes in KwaZulu-Natal. They were solid in most of the provinces, but KwaZulu-Natal losses cost them significantly. The EFF did their manifesto launch in KwaZulu-Natal. They were aiming for growth in KwaZulu-Natal, but it didn't materialize. It didn't materialize. And as a result of that, they have to take fourth position. Is the EFF dying? That's a question that comes up, or a narrative that comes up quite a bit. I think that narrative is false. Here's my reasoning. The EFF loss of 1.3 or so percent was notable but not mortal. If you look at the DA, right, in 2019, the DA lost 1.46% of the vote share from 2014. They were able to recover that in 2024 in the next election, even though, in pure numbers, they had losses, right? If you look at their pure numbers, they were on 3.6 million in 2019, and they moved to 3.5 million in 2024. So they went up a little bit, but their vote numbers actually went down, right? They went up in percentage voters went down. But overall, they were relatively stable within that 20%, 22% ballpark, right? Between 20 to 22%. What I'm trying to put across is that a party can lose vote share and not be dead, because the EFF basically got malaria, and then the media started writing obituaries for the EFF. Julius Malema was a good person, blah, 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 blah. They were at the funeral already, throwing flowers into the grave. But I think all of that is premature. Dropping 1.3% of vote share is not a death knell for a political party. It's a flashing light. It's an indicator light, but it's not something that they need to really pretend as if now the house is burning down. The EFF, I think, still has strong organizational fundamentals. They have strong leadership in Julius Malema. They have grassroots structures that are mobilized, structured, clear on what they need to do. They also have a strong presence online. Elections are not won on the internet, and obviously the internet only reflects a fragment of society. Having said all of that, you still need to have a strong presence on the big platforms: TikTok, Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, all of that. You still need that. It's still part of the game. And if you don't have that, you're out of the game, to be quite honest with you. So I don't think that the EFF is anywhere close to death. When I went to their NPA event earlier in December last year, what I saw there was that they still have energy, they still have enthusiasm, they still have an organized structure. They are going to be able to be competitive going into the local government elections. They are. That's just the reality. So I actually think that the death of EFF is a media fantasy. And I think it's a media fantasy that does well in mainstream media for a variety of reasons. I think middle-class South Africa, especially different races in middle-class South Africa, they don't actually want to entertain the idea of EFF. So it's something that is quite soothing for them to hear that, no, EFF is dying. But also, I think that the owners of mainstream media have an agenda to push that narrative, because the owners of mainstream media, ENCA, is owned by Rupert, right? And Media 24, which owns News 24, is owned by Kusbeka Naspers. These are Stellenbosch billionaires, and they have come in the crosshairs of the EFF quite often. The donors to the big political parties also are EFF rivals. If you look at the Oppenheimers, you look at Michel Leroux, who contributed a lot to the Democratic Alliance and other political parties in that framework. These are big advertisers in mainstream media. So part of what mainstream media does is that it serves the interests of advertisers, big advertisers, and the interests of the owners of capital, right? Which in this instance are the big boys from Stellenbosch. So if you own media, you can push a narrative when an entity that you don't like, an organization that you don't like, is not doing well in a particular moment. And instead of painting the EFF moment accurately, the media skipped all the way to EFF is dying. And I think I will be proven correct. They will be proven wrong. We should come back to this analysis in a few years' time. I really think that they've exaggerated what is going on with the EFF, right? Number 5. Who comes in at number 5? Number 5 goes to the African National Congress, ANC. The ANC is not the biggest loser like Change South Africa, Change Starts Now, or even ActionSA, because they managed to stay in power, right? Through a DA coalition, but they were the biggest loser in the 2024 elections in absolute terms and also percentage terms. Jay-Z used to say, men lie, women lie, numbers don't. He used to say, check the scoreboard. So what do the numbers say? The ANC was on 10 million voters in 2019, and it dropped significantly to 6.46 million voters in 2024. They moved from 57.5% of vote share with 236 in the national 230 seats in the National Assembly in 2019 to 159 seats and 40.2% of the vote. That's a significant decline. A 17% decline is major. Most significant loss of the 2024 elections. Sunday Times say that the EFF were the biggest losers of 2024, but I can't agree with that analysis or reasoning. Losing 1.3% vote share cannot be comparable to losing 17%. Losing Floyd Shivambu cannot be comparable to losing 17%. It can't be. It can't be. Even if you do manage to stay in power, you cannot be placed higher than the other top 5 political parties in terms of performance in the year. It just cannot be said to be true at this particular moment. The ANC is in trouble going into 2025 because they have to work with the enemy within the coalition, which is the DA, and they also have to manage the battle for the 2027 leadership race, which has already started. We've seen Panyaza Lesufi and Fikile Mbalula come out on different ends of that particular contest. Whether they are proxies or jockeys, time will tell. The economic fundamentals of the country are still very dire, and that also puts the ANC in a tough position. When people are unemployed, living in poverty, not getting effective service delivery, with crime in their communities, they blame the ruling party. And in a coalition or not in a coalition, the ruling party is still the ANC. So to be able to hold on to 40% is going to be very difficult. Cyril Ramaphosa is not going to be on the ballot in the next election. It's going to be tricky. It's going to be tough for the ANC to mitigate these losses, to regain, go back up. I don't think that it's going to be easy. It may happen depending on what happens between now and 2027 and what happens at the ANC conference in December of 2027. But as things stand right now, the ANC, in my estimation, was number 5 in terms of top 5 performances in 2024. What do you think, though? Which party do you rank as having performed best in 2024? What are your reasons? Let's have a conversation in the comments. Thank you so much for everyone who's watching, who's subscribed. Till the next one.